with our guests who are joining us on this broadcast also, the key takeaways from the discussions and deliberations that happened today. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi described this relationship as the pole star. Dhruv Tara guiding the way through thick and thin. So what should one make of the outcomes of the meetings today? Now, joining me on India First is Admiral Shekhar, former Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief of Western Naval Command. Pinak Ranjan Chakravarty is former High Commissioner of India to Bangladesh. Again, somebody who looks at India-Russia relationship and India-Europe very closely. Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar joins me on the show. Ambassador Sajjanhar was posted as an ambassador to Kazakhstan, somebody who's looking at the trade, was looking at the trade deals with the region very closely. And Ambassador Sajjanhar, is a new world order emerging, challenging the Europe-centric discourse and approach and decision-making? What did you make of President Putin's visit to India and his interactions with Prime Minister Narendra Modi?
Yes, thank you very much, Gaurav, for having me. The world order is definitely changing. Which way it is going, I think it is still very unclear. So, meaning if I were to say that a new world order is emerging, then possibly I would also need to identify what are the contours of that world order. So yes, things are changing. There is definitely in terms of
Okay. So give me a moment as we reestablish this
movement.
link with you. Ambassador Chakravarty, is the US seeking peace? Is Russia also looking for an off-ramp when it comes to this conflict with Ukraine? And as some European countries egging Ukraine on to fight, how do you see the equations right now? You've had world leaders engaging Russia. At the same time, is Europe being left out?
Look, I think each country and what you mentioned, Europe, not a country, but a grouping, they're all looking at their own, interests, really. And so I feel that all this will be ultimately lead to some balancing of foreign policy goals of each of these entities. And I think India and Russia are clearly showing the way that they are not going to sit back and accept the dictates of various countries like the US or the Europeans and others. The Europeans actually are in a little bit of a tight corner because they don't know where exactly to, because Trump has turned against them, because Trump is now pushing for peace. Well, the Europeans do not want peace. So I cannot understand why the Europeans are doing this. Either it is some historical hatred for Russia or the fear of Russia. Something is driving the Europeans to take this position, or they see this war as a good opportunity for their defense industries, which, as we normally used to say, that America needs a war to make its military industrial complex thrive and profit. But this time, I think Trump really wants to pull back and get some peace deal going.
Okay.
Whereas Zelensky is not willing, and the Europeans are egging him on. So this is the kind of peculiar situation we are in. But whatever it is, India and Russia have gone ahead with their relationship.
So India and Russia want to move ahead, but do we risk additional sanctions if we increase our partnership with Russia beyond, what it is? So, Ambassador, let me bring in Admiral Shekhar Sinha into this conversation. Admiral Sinha, do we risk additional sanctions if we improve economic ties with Russia? Or, in your view, has the US seen the futility of its actions? This visit, if you notice, on defense, it was relatively low-key. There was more on opening of Russian markets for Indian goods and services, space or energy, including the small modular reactors.
Thank you, Gaurav, for getting me on your program. I quite agree with what Ambassador Pinak just mentioned. The Americans should get a message. If they don't, and if they put more sanctions, actually speaking, it doesn't matter to India now. It really doesn't matter. Because if it is a sanction between two of them, they would have already discussed the, this rupee-ruble trade or is there a third party from which maybe a dirham from UAE or something? And I think that something is cooking, and that's good for the having a multipolarity in the world. First thing is currency, I would guess. Like you rightly said that there's nothing in the open domain that what has happened in the defense collaboration. But mind you, there are a lot of indirect or rather dual-use technologies where defense is very much there. For example, space. We need to launch many more satellites to get equal with the Chinese. We may not get equal, but we should be able to deter the Chinese from destroying our
Sure.
satellites. That's number one. There has been some on the artificial intelligence and cyber security. The Russians are very good in cyber. As you know, the Americans keep complaining that the Russians have jammed their so and so circuit and they have gone over and done that. So I think that the threat of sanction, to my mind, it really doesn't matter. Though the fact is that the Reliance industry has reduced the import of oil from Russia, and there are already, if I recall, the CMD of the chairman of the Reliance industry was in Saudi Arabia about 2 weeks back, and I'm sure he would have met, the Mohammed bin Salman, and they would have had some talk. The talk that I can think of, well, he can buy a share in their petrol company, and if he buys
Okay.
a share, then it's legal to take things at a price
So,
what they would give to company shareholder.
but
I mean,
the
I'm sure
way
he'll
the
buy a good share.
MOUs were signed today, Ambassador Sajjanhar, the number of MOUs that were inked, when we're looking at greater access to Russian market for our pharmaceuticals, for labor movement, when you talk about deepening ties, raising it to $100 billion by 2030, and Prime Minister was hopeful it could happen way before 2030, looking at the conference. Okay, give me a moment. I want to show you those images, and these are live images of that state dinner at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. President Putin, Prime Minister Narendra Modi with him, the Vice President on the other side, and President Draupadi Murmu is reading the welcome, and Nirmala Sitharaman, the finance minister, the Russian finance minister, then I can see Kirti Vardhan Singh, Minister of State for External Affairs, the Vice President on the other side of President Putin, Dmitry Peskov on the other, to his side, the Russian finance minister, the Russian defense minister, the Russian health minister, also seen in these images. Okay, and I can also see Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal in this in these images. I don't know if we have audio to that, and we're getting these images courtesy RT India. RT, incidentally, is the Russian channel that has just launched in India, and Russian President Vladimir Putin was just there at the launch of RT. This again is one way of for the world to know the Russian perspective through India. And let's try and listen in. Let's see if there's an audio link to that. So shortly, hopefully, we will get you more on that. But Ambassador Sajjanhar, if I could come back to you. If we were to increase our bilateral trade to $100 billion by 2030, or as the Prime Minister said even before that, do we risk additional sanctions if the Russia-Ukraine war is not sorted out quickly?
Well, thank you very much, Gaurav, for having me on the show. And my apologies that the connection didn't work earlier. No, I don't think we can have, any fear of any sanctions. $100 billion is not all that huge an amount. I think for our own bilateral purposes, we'll really have to see that it is, what is the composition of the trade, that it is not heavily weighted against us, that the trade deficit that we have at the moment, about $60 billion out of a total trade of about
70,
$68.7
yeah.
billion dollars. That's not sustainable. And, for two strategic partners, special privileged partnership, etc., it doesn't work. So, it has. But That having been said, I think what I could sense from the meetings and from the pronouncements, and also what Mr. Putin said in the interview that he gave to your two colleagues, Geeta and Anjana, that there is determination on both sides to
Yes.
enhance this partnership, because we've been talking about defense, we've been talking about oil, we've been talking about nuclear energy. These are the three pillars. And it is dismal if you take out the oil component and the fertilizer component, the total
Yes.
trade is just about $10 billion. Meaning I have served in Moscow on two
Yes.
occasions. We have always worked towards increasing that trade. And the target was $30 billion by 2025. Now we have $69 billion, but it's heavily weighted against us. As I said, it's not sustainable. Both of them have now determined what are the items that can be exported, additional items that can be exported from India and
Okay.
there is also the free trade agreement between India and the Eurasian Economic Union. I think that could also serve as a game changer. We
Ambassador
have
Chakravarty, while there was conversation, since Ambassador Sajjanhar also mentioned that exclusive interview to India today, President Putin, in a way, exposed the hypocrisy of the West and especially United States of America when he said they continue to buy uranium from Russia, they continue to buy fertilizers and yet impose additional penalty and tariffs on India. Do you see forward movement on that? How would the West be viewing this bonhomie between India and Russia? Will America double down? Or in your view, would they systematically want to perhaps backtrack and bring the India-US relationship on an even keel?
Well, I think, as you said, it won't go down very well because they don't like what's happening because they think India should not get close to Russia. But that's their view, and we have our own view. And you are talking about more sanctions. I don't know whether they will come or not. If they come, then I think Indo-US relations will slide further. And we will have to then look at other markets as we are doing now. The Eurasian one mentioned by Ashok is another
Yes.
one that if we can get that going, then we'll have more markets coming. And my understanding is that even some of the exports which were hit very hard by the additional sanctions imposed by Trump, they seem to be recovering because other markets are coming up. And Russia
In
obviously
fact, Prime
has
Minister Narendra
the
Modi specifically mentioned dairy and fisheries in context of Russia with that MOU, sir.
exactly. So Russia is a big market, and I think if we can divert some of those exports to Russia, and Russia needs some of these consumer items which they buy from elsewhere. If we have to be competitive, of course, and then I think, and some non-tariff barriers are there which need to be removed. And
Hmm.
also, the transportation to Russia is a little expensive. So we need to start connectivity, which we are doing. So from Chennai and other places. So these are some of the things that we need to plan, and it is being planned and put it
Okay.
into practice.
And Admiral Sinha, your assessment of the significance of the MOU on shipbuilding, that's something that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been big on. And the navigation of Arctic waters, polar waters skilling. If that starts happening now, how soon do we see an impact? The icebreakers, are we getting in to that region which will be desperately needed perhaps 10 to 20 years from now or even sooner? Sir, request you to unmute yourself.
Shipbuilding is it's a very good move because if you see the Sagarmala project, there has been approval already given to make two shipyards, one on the east coast and one on the west coast, and that the government is going to invest a lot of money. So the Russian shipbuilders, if they come and tie up with any of our shipbuilders, so that's going to be a good move. But I would think, but that only going to increase the trade deficit. So what I would believe that India should invest, in companies together with the Russians in Russia, which will give you little more outing of your, your own money. and you reduce the little bit of deficit. So I wouldn't be surprised that if the shipbuilding company is actually in Russia, and with the Indian partnership and India investing some money there in FDI, and that ship should be building for both India and Russia. The second one that you talked about, the Arctic navigation, no, there is no hurry. But you never know the manner in which the world is changing. Tomorrow, this might be a better route to send your, shall I say this,
Goods
send
to
your
the west. Yeah.
to the Atlantic, and countries very close to Atlantic. The European Union, etc., with whom our trade is improving. But more importantly, it is getting a little bit, shall I say, weaponized. Arctic is getting weaponized a little bit.
Yes.
And you see that if there is a talk of sending some American troops and some nuclear weapons on the in
I think we're
Finland.
getting the first image. I think we're getting the first image of the gifts that are being presented. And if I can read that correctly, that's Assam tea that has been presented. And I would ask our producers to, give us more details on, well, you know, some of the gifts that have been exchanged and presented to the Russian president from the Indian side. Let me get you more on that in just a moment. So, okay, so this is fine Assam black tea. Tea grown in the fertile Brahmaputra plains, prized for its robust flavor, bright liquor, and traditional processing. Also, the recognized GI tag in 2007. So there's Assam tea that's been presented. There's on its silver tea set. This is from Murshidabad, a silver tea set, intricately carved. This again is one of the presents. And incidentally, in both societies, Russia and India, tea is a symbol of warmth, connection, and shared stories. Admiral Sinha, you've been to Russia so many times, as has Ambassador Chakravarty and Ambassador Sajjanhar. The tea ceremony is huge, the bread and tea ceremony.
But that's true. You're right. I mean, tea is really considered. It's just like having kahwa when you go to the West Asian countries. They begin with kahwa and they end with kahwa, or cafe as they call it. So they're very similar thing here in Russia. You start, if you're not at a dinner banquet, you start with tea and the tea just carries on. Tea never seems to finish on the side table.